Unbelievable things people did in the 70s that would be illegal today. Back then, the world felt bigger and the rules smaller. The air smelled of gasoline and freedom, and childhood came without helmets, seatbelts, or second thoughts. You could taste adventure in the dust, hear it in the creak of your bicycle, and feel it in the wind rushing past your face. Remember when danger didn't feel dangerous? When curiosity was stronger than caution, and "don't do that" was just a suggestion? Can you imagine a time when parents waved from the porch as kids disappeared for hours? No phones, no tracking, just trust. Let's go back for a minute. The 1970s, a decade stitched together with bell-bottoms, disco lights, and a reckless sort of innocence. A time when life seemed simpler because nobody had yet realized how risky it really was. Back then, rules were softer, skies were hazier, and freedom had no warning labels. Playing on train tracks. Every small town had them, those endless steel lines stretching toward forever. To a child, they weren't train routes, they were balance beams, treasure trails, playgrounds. You'd walk the rails, arms out, pretending you were a circus performer. Sometimes you'd press a penny flat under the rumble of a passing train, holding your breath, giggling at the danger. No fences, no cameras, just adrenaline and laughter echoing between the tracks. Today, step a single foot on a railway property and you're trespassing. A fine, a warning, maybe worse. Back then, it was just fun. Clackers. Two bright acrylic balls on a string, the soundtrack of every summer. You'd swing them up and down until they smacked together with that sharp clack, clack, clack. Each hit faster than the last. The challenge was to keep the rhythm going without cracking a finger or a window. They'd shimmer in the sunlight like gemstones right before one exploded into sharp plastic shrapnel. But nobody cared. If it broke, you laughed, bandaged a bruise, and tried again. By the end of the decade, hospitals had seen enough. Clackers were banned, replaced with softer, safer toys. But those who played remember the thrill and that perfect sound that meant summer had begun. Lawn darts. Barbecue smoke in the air, grass under your feet, and sharp-tipped metal flying across the yard. The goal was simple: throw the dart, hit the target ring, score the point. The danger was simpler: one wrong throw, one curious kid running through the middle, disaster. Yet we called it family fun. The clang of a dart striking soil felt satisfying, almost proud. Now, that same toy could send you straight to court. In the 70s, it was Saturday afternoon entertainment. Today, it's a banned weapon in disguise. Back then, even the toys had an edge. No apps, no Wi-Fi, just patience and maybe a few Band-Aids. Childhood came with scrapes and stories, not warnings and disclaimers. It was not about being reckless. It was about feeling alive. And in that world, nobody thought twice about risk. The 70s were not perfect, but they were free. Stay with me, because what comes next will make you question how we ever survived those days. Do you remember the smell of baking plastic and sugar? That soft yellow glow from a toy oven that made you feel like a real chef? Back then, childhood didn't need permission. It just needed imagination. The Easy Bake Oven. Every little hand wanted one. You'd tear open those tiny packets of cake mix, stir the powder with water, pour it into a pan the size of your palm. Then you'd slide it into the oven, powered not by a heating coil, but by a light bulb. And that bulb, it got hotter than you could ever imagine. Kids burned their fingers, melted the plastic. Sometimes the whole kitchen smelled like singed sugar. But we didn't mind. We waited, wide-eyed, until the light dimmed and the cake was ready. Half-baked, uneven, but ours. Today, that same toy would never make it past safety regulations. Back then, it was a symbol of growing up and taking a tiny risk tasted sweet. Children buying cigarettes. Yes, you heard that right. In the 70s, it wasn't strange to see a 10-year-old walking into a store, clutching a note from mom that simply said, "1 pack of Marlboros, please." And the cashier? They'd smile, maybe even ruffle your hair and hand it over. No ID, no judgment, no problem. Cigarette machines stood in diners, bowling alleys, and gas stations. Just drop in coins, pull the lever, and out slid a pack. We didn't know it was poison. Or maybe we did, but nobody talked about it. Now, even standing too close to that machine would make headlines. Times change, and so does innocence. High school smoking areas. Believe it or not, schools once had designated corners for teens to smoke during breaks. Can you picture that? Rows of lockers, the smell of chalk, and right outside, a cloud of cigarette smoke rising into the sky. Teachers would pass by, sometimes join in. Nobody called it rebellion, it was routine. Today, a single puff near campus would bring police, suspension, maybe even expulsion. Back then, it was just another part of growing up too fast. Cigarette ads on TV. You'd turn on the television and there he was, the Marlboro Man, rugged, calm, untouchable, or a glamorous woman exhaling smoke like it was confidence itself. Smoking wasn't just accepted, it was marketed as cool. Commercials said things like, "You've come a long way, baby," and people believed them. Then science caught up. The truth hit harder than any slogan. By 1971, cigarette ads vanished from American TV screens forever. But those black and white frames, the horses, the desert, the slow music, still linger like ghosts from another time. Smoking on airplanes. And if you flew in the 70s, you remember the thick haze that hung in the air like a fog. Ashtrays built into every armrest, tiny glowing tips of cigarettes flickering between seats. Smoking or non-smoking, they'd ask, as if the smoke respected boundaries. Flight attendants moved through that cloud with practiced smiles. You'd land with your clothes smelling like someone else's habit. Today, it sounds insane, but back then, it was just part of the journey, a symbol of sophistication, even freedom. We didn't see danger. We saw adulthood. We saw cool. The 70s were an age of contradictions, innocent, yet fearless. Looking back, it's a wonder how we ever made it through, lungs full and spirits unbroken. Because that was the beauty of it. We didn't live carefully. We just lived. Back then, cars didn't just take you places. They were the adventure. Metal beasts with chrome smiles, rolling down endless highways to the sound of Fleetwood Mac or Led Zeppelin on the radio. No GPS, no seat sensors, no rules that told you how safe you had to be. Loose seatbelt laws. Seatbelts were optional. Some people even tucked them behind the seats to keep the dashboard from blinking. Parents would let their kids stand between the front seats, tiny hands gripping the dashboard as the car hummed along. You'd see toddlers bouncing in the back, windows down, hair wild in the wind, the smell of gasoline mixing with laughter. It wasn't neglect, it was normal. No one thought twice about it. It was freedom on 4 wheels, unfiltered, unrestrained. It wasn't until the mid-'80s that laws started catching up with common sense. Now, forgetting your seatbelt can cost you a fine. Back then, it just meant one less thing to worry about. Minimal child car seat rules. Those old car seats weren't built to save lives. They were built for convenience. Bright colors, plastic frames, soft padding, and no real safety. Some looked more like booster thrones than protection devices. Parents trusted them because everyone else did. Some didn't use them at all. A mother would cradle her baby in her arms while dad drove, one hand on the wheel, the other tapping to the radio. It felt safe enough. But then reality hit. Reports came pouring in. Accidents, heartbreaks, lessons learned too late. By the mid-80s, everything changed. New standards, crash tests, regulations, because love wasn't enough anymore. Today, strapping your child in isn't a choice. It's the law. Drunk driving with high BAC limits. And then there were the nights. Neon signs flickering outside diners, the jukebox humming softly, the taste of beer still on your tongue. You'd toss the keys, grin, and say, "I'm fine." And most people believed it. In the 70s, the legal limit for blood alcohol was 0.10%, sometimes even higher. It sounds insane now, but back then it was normal to drive home from a party with the windows rolled down and the music loud enough to drown out guilt. It was not until tragedy spoke louder, when families like those in Mothers Against Drunk Driving stood up, that things began to shift. They turned heartbreak into movement, and the world finally sobered up. Minimal airport security. Flying in the 70s was pure magic. No long lines, no scanners, no pat-downs. You'd walk straight to the gate, ticket in hand, hug your loved ones right before boarding. Strangers waved goodbye from the terminal windows. No one was searching your bags for liquids, and nobody cared how big your shampoo bottle was. Even the cockpit door stayed open sometimes. The captain greeting kids mid-flight with a smile and a set of golden wings. It felt human, warm, trusting. But trust came at a cost. Hijackings, fear, and eventually tragedy changed everything. By the time the 2000s rolled around, airports had transformed into fortresses of security. Now every beep and scan reminds us of a freedom we'll never feel again. Back then, danger didn't have warning labels. We just lived, messy, fearless, and free. Maybe too free. But that's what made the 70s unforgettable. A time when every road trip, every flight, every late-night drive felt like a small rebellion. Not because we wanted to break rules, but because there weren't many to break. And somehow, we made it through. No seatbelts, no helmets, no guarantees. Just faith that the world would be kind enough to let us keep living fast. The 70s were wild, not just in music or fashion, but in the way people lived. Rules bent easily, and sometimes they didn't exist at all. Freedom wasn't a slogan, it was a lifestyle, and sometimes it went a little too far. The drinking age, just 18. Can you imagine walking into a bar right after graduation? In the 70s, you didn't need a fake ID. 18 was old enough to vote, fight in a war, and drink. College campuses had beer vending machines, and every weekend felt like a festival. No one thought twice about a teenager ordering a round for friends. Bars were packed with people barely old enough to rent a car today. It was part of growing up, a rite of passage before adulthood truly began. But freedom has its consequences. Drunk driving accidents soared. Headlines turned from celebration to tragedy. By 1984, the government stepped in, raising the legal age back to 21. The parties quieted, the streets got safer, but a whole era of youthful recklessness came to an end. Child labor, a normal sight. Today, a child selling lemonade feels nostalgic, but back then, kids did much more. They worked in fields, family shops, even small factories. It wasn't unusual to see a 12-year-old hauling boxes or sweeping a workshop floor. Parents called it building character. Kids called it just another day. In small towns, family farms thrived on those little hands. Work before school, work after. Nobody thought it was wrong. It was survival. But laws tightened, mindsets shifted, and suddenly, childhood meant what it was supposed to. Learning, playing, dreaming, not laboring. Still, ask anyone who grew up then, and they'll tell you, it made them tough. Hard times built strong people. And maybe, just maybe, that's something we've lost along the way. Owning exotic pets without permits. You could walk into a pet store in 1975 and leave with a python. No paperwork, no license, no one asking questions. Parrots, monkeys, iguanas, even snakes the length of your arm were sold like goldfish. It sounded exciting, almost glamorous, until one day your pet outgrew the tank and became a neighborhood headline. Escaped reptiles, abandoned birds, wild creatures in suburban basements. It happened more than you'd think. Eventually, the law caught up. By the late 90s, states began requiring permits, and the wild returned to the wild. But for a while, your living room could have been a jungle, and nobody blinked. It was in candies, cereals, drinks, even lipsticks, that bright, irresistible red. Kids loved it, parents bought it, and companies cashed in. Until whispers started spreading. It might cause cancer. The panic was swift. Suddenly, red candies vanished. Even M&Ms stopped making their red ones, just to play it safe. By 1976, red dye number 2 was banned in the U.S., and people realized that even color could be dangerous. It was one of the first big moments when food safety met fear, and it changed everything about what we eat today. Cyclamate sweetener. Before Diet Coke, before zero sugar labels, there was cyclamate, the miracle sweetener. 30 times sweeter than sugar, calorie-free, and cheap. It was in everything, sodas, candies, gum, until one study changed everything. Scientists found it caused tumors in lab mice, and that was it. The U.S. banned it in 1969, but it stayed on shelves into the 70s in some countries. Now it's gone, replaced by safer, tested alternatives. But ask anyone who grew up then, they'll tell you diet soda just doesn't taste the same anymore. The 70s were a laboratory of life, experimenting with freedom, flavor, and fearlessness. People tried everything once and questioned it later. We didn't have endless information or constant warnings. We just trusted the world to be kind. And sometimes it wasn't. But maybe that's why those years were so unforgettable. Because even when things went wrong, they taught us what right should look like. If freedom had a smell in the 70s, it was gasoline. Thick, sweet, metallic, the scent of every highway, every station, every breath. Engines roared louder, exhaust curled like smoke signals in the summer heat, and nobody thought that the air itself could be poisoning us. Leaded gasoline. It was the lifeblood of America's cars, smooth, powerful, unstoppable. But with every puff from the tailpipe, a silent killer filled the skies. Lead dust settled on playgrounds, on porches, on tiny hands gripping ice cream cones. We didn't know then what we know now, that every drive was rewriting our health. By the 90s, unleaded became the law, and the world breathed cleaner again. But sometimes, when you catch that faint smell of old fuel at a vintage car show, you remember, not the danger, but the drive. Lead paint, bright, glossy, durable, the colors of childhood bedrooms and family kitchens, walls in sunny yellow, cribs in cherry red, toys painted like rainbows. Lead made it shine, and shine it did, until the shine started to fade into sickness. Children got sick, homes turned hazardous, and innocence peeled off the walls one flake at a time. By 1978, lead paint was banned, but millions of homes still carry those ghosts under layers of safer color. Back then, beauty was worth the risk. Now, safety is the color we paint our lives with. Flame retardants. There was a time when everything, from your couch to your pajamas, was coated in chemicals meant to keep you safe. Sleepwear that wouldn't catch fire, furniture that wouldn't burn. It sounded smart until people started getting sick from the very fabrics they trusted. Those invisible toxins lingered in our homes, in our air, in our blood. What was meant to protect us slowly poisoned us. By the 2000s, the truth caught up and the bans came fast. But the lesson? Sometimes, in trying to control nature, we only make it more dangerous. Selling raw milk. There was nothing like it. Straight from the farm, rich and creamy, still warm from the cow. Poured into glass bottles, it felt pure, natural, wholesome. Families swore it made them stronger, but hidden in that purity were invisible threats, bacteria, infections, sickness. By 1987, pasteurization became the law for interstate milk. Some still chase that real taste, calling it freedom of choice. Others call it a risk not worth taking. Either way, the milk of memory is sweeter than reality. Candy cigarettes. Tiny white sticks wrapped in paper, a red tip painted on top. You'd hold it between your fingers, puff the powdered sugar smoke, and feel grown up. Adults smiled, kids laughed, nobody thought twice. It was just candy, but the message lingered. This is what cool looks like. By the late 80s, they disappeared from shelves or were renamed harmlessly as candy sticks. But deep down, we know what they really were. Training wheels for a habit that almost everyone had. Still, for a moment, they made you feel older, bolder, unstoppable. And that's what the 70s were all about, feeling unstoppable. It was a decade of contradictions, wild yet innocent, dangerous yet beautiful. People lived with open windows and open hearts. They didn't fear what they didn't know. They trusted life, even when it wasn't safe. We traded that raw, reckless freedom for seatbelts and safety warnings, for smoke-free cabins and BPA-free bottles. We gained security, but somewhere along the way, we lost the wild heartbeat of living without fear. Maybe that's why we look back with such longing, because the 70s weren't perfect. They were real. They were laughter without filters, mistakes without headlines, and memories without screens. Not better, just different. And maybe, just maybe, we can't go back, but we can remember what it felt like to live free and alive. So tag someone who still remembers the smell of gasoline, the sound of clackers, or the taste of childhood before warning labels. Share this if it brought you back to a time when life was risky, raw, and beautifully real.